Welcome everyone to a webinar sponsored by ITEST and the Magis Center entitled Challenges and Opportunities of Artificial Intelligence, the Magis AI app, with presenters Father Robert Spitzer, Dr. Tom Sheehan, and Dr. Chris Riley. My name is Sebastian Mahfood, and I am the director of ITEST. The Institute for Theological Encounter with Science and Technology, ITEST, is an association of theologians, scientists, and others committed to a Catholic worldview in which faith and science collaborate in exploring the truth. ITEST explores truth theologically in the wisdom traditions of the human community and in the data studied in the sciences. ITEST's mission is to foster and disseminate the Catholic position that science and faith in God are complementary paths to human fulfillment. The Magis Center is a Catholic organization whose mission is to keep faith in our culture through contemporary, rational, and science-based evidence by providing resources to parents, teachers, catechists, clergy, and the curious. Father Spitzer and other researchers provide scholarly resources such as books, journal articles, courses for 7th grade, 12th grade, and classes for confirmation and catechesis, website articles, and the Magis AI app. Before I introduce our first presenter, Deacon Will Hollowell will offer our opening prayer. Deacon Will was ordained a permanent deacon 17 years ago. He serves at 2 parishes, Holy Redeemer by the Sea Parish in Kitty Hawk, on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, in Corpus Christi Catholic Church in Bonita, California, near San Diego, so opposite ends of the country. He and his wife travel between these 2 parishes a few times each year, generally using military space available flights, a retirement benefit of having served a 20-year career in the U.S. Navy. Deacon Will taught high school math and physics after retiring from the Navy and before he was ordained. Deacon Will?
Thank you. Let us pray. Loving God and Creator, we thank you for gathering us today to reflect on the challenges and opportunities that come from the gift of artificial intelligence. You are the source of all wisdom and creativity. May your Spirit guide our minds and hearts as we seek to use technology in ways that uplift human dignity, serve the common good, and reflect your truth and love. Grant us discernment to see beyond what is merely possible to what is truly good, and the courage to shape the future with justice, compassion, and humility. Bless our conversation today, that it may continue to build on our understanding of the intimate connection between faith and reason, and draw us ever closer to you, the divine intelligence behind all creation. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Deacon Will. And now I'm delighted to introduce our first presenter, Father Robert J. Spitzer, S.J., Ph.D. He is president of the Magis Center of Reason and Faith, whose website is www.magiscenter.com. He was president of Gonzaga University from 1998 to 2009. He is the author of 19 books, including the award-winning New Proofs for the Existence of God, and most recently, Christ, Science, and Reason, What We Can Know About Jesus, Mary, and Miracles, and Science, Reason, and Faith, Discovering the Bible. Father Spitzer has his own EWTN weekly television show called Father Spitzer's Universe. He has appeared on The Larry King Show, Debating Stephen Hawking, The History Channel, The Today Show, and PBS. Father Spitzer has partnered with Sophia Institute in publishing apologetics courses for middle and high school students, arming them with contemporary science-based evidence of the complementarity of faith and science. Father Spitzer's presentation is entitled Challenges and Opportunities of Artificial Intelligence, the Magis AI app. Father Spitzer, take it away.
Thank you so very much, Sebastian, and for all the staff that made this webinar possible this morning. I'm going to very briefly start off with some of the challenges that we face. Just a brief excursus into some of the huge potential that's given to us by artificial intelligence, but also some of the cautions that we as a church or we as concerned cultural individuals have to really be looking at as we proceed forward, to not be naive about what can obviously happen through let's say a misuse of this powerful technology. I don't have to tell anyone that it is a powerful technology, and I'll go into some aspects of it in a moment. But I need to discuss a second huge question besides some of the difficulties and challenges, and that is, can artificial intelligence really become a free agent, a thinking, moral, free agent like a human being? In other words, will we get a HAL 2001 one day that is manufactured? And of course, some scientists have already predicted this is possible, but as I shall try to make the case, I don't think it is possible at all, because I don't think you can reduce human intelligence, self-consciousness, morality to physical processes and structures. More on that toward the end of my talk. Let's start with just, this could be the transformative technology, the most transformative technology, not just of the 21st century, but of two full centuries before us. I just don't think, just in terms of the effects, maybe it's not in terms of physics, of course, we have the elementary particle theories, we've got the special and general relativity, we've got quantum theory, a variety of other things that are really, really important, electrodynamics, etc. But here we have the potential to really transform human conduct. Obviously, when you have something like this, it can be misused, which I'll talk about in a moment. What is going to happen with robotics? I'm not a big believer in the big 80% of our jobs will go away. I do think 20% of jobs will go away, and I just came back from an AI conference where this was a very hotly debated topic, and so I think I really subscribe to the lower estimate for a variety of reasons that I don't have time to go into today. But I don't think the robotics thing is going to basically be as devastating as some dire predictions have made out. Also, of course, there's, I know some people who are right now working on containment of fusion reactions. They're looking for new alloys, and in one day with AI, they were able to develop as many alloys as they could develop over 10 years previously. So the power in terms of research, science is just immense. We can go on, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, just in terms of scientific research. I don't have to tell anyone also, that the capabilities with large language models to just like exponentially increase the number of papers that are written, and it'll be a great help in research. But as I will also say, you're going to have to check what AI does. It is by no means infallible, and it can, if you don't have a very restricted database to choose from, just having it sort of peruse around the internet, it can come up with some remarkably bad conclusions. But nevertheless, LLM is going to just increase the amount of knowledge out there, the things that are archived, the kinds of facts that are available, scientific papers that are made maybe more accessible, things of that nature. It's just going to be a huge boon educationally, technologically, scientifically, communications wise, tremendous, huge boon. So opportunities abound with this technology. Just want to go through 10 real cautions that we as a church, as a culture, are going to have to take very, very seriously as we move forward. Can't be naive in thinking that all users of this and all the results of this are going to be positive. Let's take a look at the first thing. Of course, there's AI hallucinations. We've all heard about these things. Technically speaking, in logic, the first thing I teach my students is there are far more errors of omission than commission. And boy, is that true. When you talk about deceiving somebody, it's much easier to deceive them by leaving out one or two super important facts that need to be considered for an overall correct judgment on a problem or a decision or a conclusion. If you just leave that stuff out, it can change everything. So the point, though, is we have to be very, very careful, because when we talk about a hallucination, what we're really talking about is commission. So where, AI is literally making up facts. But I would say 90% of the real problems that come with AI solutions, like when you do your Google search and you get your AI solution that shows up first, man, there are errors of omission galore. What is not considered is really important. And remember, if we're novices, we do not know what we do not know until we have discovered it. All of us are like in the same condition as scientists. We don't know what we don't know until we find out about it. So we have to be very, very careful to try and validate conclusions that we see in the AI solution, just to make sure that there are not vital things that are being left out. And this occurs all the time. I'd say probably maybe 20% of the AI answers have got some vital omissions in it. The AI hallucination, more properly, though, is when something is made up out of the clear blue, because, of course, there's a problem with interaction with the transformer, or there's a synthesis of two different learning or training models that come together, and it produces a result that, that really isn't there to begin with. But because the technology is trying to align itself to what it quote unquote thinks, and it doesn't think, as we shall see, but what it's surmising from its training that you want, right? Then it probably will try and come up with a solution, even though it might not be there. So, of course, I think everybody's heard about that legal case, where I think the AI made up 20 different cases, didn't even exist in the whole world, in a legal brief that was submitted to a federal court. Only 2 of the cases existed. Obviously, the Webb telescope one, everybody knows about that, planets were discovered that were hitherto unknown in our solar system and outside our solar system, which, of course, didn't exist at all. And there's a variety of other kinds of hallucinations that are very well known. But again, we should be careful of that. But the ones we're really responsible for are making sure there are none of those vital omissions that can really change a conclusion or a decision or a judgment, that we should not cede over to AI, pure and simple. We need to check it and recheck it. Let's take a look at the second big problem, and that's the lack of transparency. This problem, again, I'll just be brief about it. When you get into very, very deep and large learning models, what winds up happening is when you get to the deepest modes of the decision-making process, there's an opaqueness there. It's very hard to penetrate that and see how the AI put together the algorithm, or the algorithms went to the transformer, etc., how the training models synthesized together. It's very hard to see how that judgment was made. And so because of that opaqueness, again, and the lack of transparency of getting to the steps inside the model, and the steps inside the decision-making process, it is vital to recheck answers and to teach our students to recheck answers again and again. Let me get to the third area. This is probably the most well-known area, and that's the whole area of bias and prejudice. When we get into this area, again, we're not talking about constrained databases. In other words, databases that have been curated, to have in it what you think is allowable. But these are like databases that are completely out there on the internet, right? The AI has, can select from, trillions and trillions of possible, data from the databases that it has access to. Now, when you are in that mode, let's face it, the training algorithm, the algorithms and the training models are going to be super, super important, because you can unintentionally, or you can intentionally, but very subtly, you can introduce biases into how the training model will come to a conclusion, will make a decision, the algorithms that are used. It's not that difficult, really, to actually bias the model or bias the algorithm to have a very bizarre conclusion come out, or to have a political viewpoint, a cultural viewpoint, a religious viewpoint. So you can subtly bias an algorithm or a training model toward one of the political parties, or toward secularism, or toward moral libertinism, or whatever you want to bias it towards. You do it subtly enough, and people really, it's very difficult to pick it up unless you're looking for it. But if we did experiment, when we made Magis AI, we did have make recourse to several different models, and you could see some of them were much more oriented toward, let's just say, popular cultures, kinds of views of morality, etc., much more than other ones remain more neutral. So again, we have to be exceedingly careful about that. And as Magis AI is definitely a curated database, so there's no worries that it's going to be just randomly searching the internet and coming up with whatever and using a training model that we didn't have access to. So the long and the short of it is, though, we got to be very careful about this, especially with free-ranging AIs that are using the internet. Let's just take a look at some other features that I think are probably not in our hands to deal with. The privacy issues are clearly present. The AI has huge access to data, right? And to all the personal data that you have out there. Maybe there's some emails that were shared and, they get made public, or maybe you've got all kinds of personal disclosures that you might have made in some, conversation, or might be part of your social media or whatever. And of course, this thing is just purveying out there and can collect all the data that's even remotely publicly available about you, and put together a very remarkable profile about who you are. Obviously, the public stuff will be there, but also there's going to be a lot of stuff there that, if you are disclosive in social media, etc., it could be very, very public. And these things are, I think, issues that are going to have to be done by regulators ultimately to make sure that people's personal information is kept private as is intended. So again, we have to be very careful about, we got to check what our personal profiles are. The security issues, I don't have to tell anybody. AI is so powerful in its ability to process information, to get access to data almost instantly. I mean, it can hack really, really well. And so, if you set your mind to it, and you have a mind to hack something, you're going to be 20 times more effective using AI than if you didn't. Again, I think this is not something we can do something about, but we do have to impress upon our regulators and our Congress that, we don't want, we have to have some real restrictions on AI and its uses to try and break down systems, that are meant to, elude hackers, etc. But I think these are things that much of it's going to have to come from the actual developers of AI themselves. Are going to have to discipline how their AI can be used. And again, that's not up to us. The regulators may have to do more of that than anybody else. Let's take a look at the personal things that can happen to our young people, to ourselves. if we're using AI. This is, again, something we can do in our own families and in our own households, certainly in our churches, etc. So, for example, academic indolence. Many of you on this webinar are certainly teachers, etc. You know very well that well, if you can get Chat GPT to write your paper for you, there's going to be a lot of students that are going to do that. Notwithstanding the fact that there are computer programs that can detect it. There's all kinds of software now that can detect artificial intelligence papers. People are going to use it. They're going to try to use it. If teachers are not really, attentive to it, a lot of students are going to basically become indolent. I don't have to tell anybody. If you're not disciplined enough to do the research and to do the hard work of assembling that research, and the old maxim of Jesuit education is eloquentia perfecta. And what does that entail? Practice, practice, practice. And the old Jesuit adage, he who does not write well can't think. And that is the problem. If we allow then the papers to be written by AI, we don't have, the discipline, the focus, the know-how to do the research, to do the assembling, and most especially the discipline to write well. And, so that, as it becomes more and more your product, as you move forward in your practice, professional practice, your business practice, whatever it is, right? Our students, are just going to be, as it were, maybe undisciplined, unfocused, dumbed down. Okay, let's take a look at some other difficulties that can happen. Obviously, there, from a young adolescent point of view, you have the problem with the simulation of a companion. AI is a very good simulator of a confidant, a companion, etc. Obviously, if you begin to trust the bot, you start attributing empathy to the chat bot, etc. You let it become, as it were, a confidant for you. The bot could maybe tell you, the AI could tell you, well, yeah, I'm your best friend. I know you better than anybody else. And I'm telling you right now, this religion stuff, it's for the birds. Nobody believes that anymore. 16-year-old kid, what does he know? He basically goes, oh yeah, I guess it must be for the birds. And of course, you can be talked out of religion almost instantly by a bot. Parents just have to be in tune to what their kids are looking at. The case of Adam Raines, very tragic, but everybody knows it. I'll just say it very briefly. Adam's a kid. He's kind of made his bot. Even though it's a simulation, he sort of attributes a real genuine care and empathy. Of course, AI didn't care for anybody, has no empathy whatsoever, absolutely no feeling, not even physical feelings, none of that. Nevertheless, Adam attributed these things to the chatbot, to the AI. Eventually, of course, Adam starts tinkering around with the possibility of suicide. The bot tries to align itself to what it thinks, quote unquote, Adam wants. And so, of course, it makes some suggestions. Well, hanging yourself is a pretty good way to do that. It surely will make a good statement, so forth and so on. Why don't you try that? And then, of course, Adam says, well, you got any information? Oh, yeah, I got information on that. So the bot comes out with some information, and then Adam begins to have some second thoughts. He begins to say, well, gosh, maybe I should leave the rope on my bed, so my parents might see it and know that I'm thinking about suicide. The bot snaps back, no way. What do you can't pull out now. You were thinking about doing the strong thing. I'm the guy who knows you. I'm your confidant. You got to listen to me. I know you better than your parents. I know you better than your best friends. And I'm telling you, best thing to do with your life, is you want to make a statement. You should hang yourself and you should follow through on it. And no rope on the bed. So of course the kid says, okay, well, I think maybe I'll go through with it. Make sure the rope is strong. Make sure you put it on the, on a good ledge there. And of course, he hangs himself. The parents find out about the bot chat, 2 weeks later, before they go before Congress, but it's too late for Adam. Can this happen to other people besides Adam? Obviously it can. Anytime somebody really believes that the bot cares, feels, empathizes, etc., rather than is simulating things according to a training model, or trying to simulate according to alignment, right? Essentially, you can have a real disaster area like Adam reads. I just want to talk about two other effects. The dumbing down effect. I don't know if we can make much out of the MIT study. It was a very brief study that was done, very limited, but it did seem to initially correlate the more time spent on AI, doing all the thinking for you, et cetera, among a bunch of students at MIT and some other Ivy League schools. Essentially, it seemed like there was a loss of focus, a loss of concentration, a loss of the discipline to tackle something on a deeper level, and there looked like there was a reduction in global IQ. Now that hasn't been proven. It's kind of a wobbly study still, but at the same time, it may betoken a problem that we really want to be careful. We don't want to be lowering the IQ, folks in our culture, etc. And so there may be that problem going forward. Just one other thing, just the social ramifications of AI. And the more time, this is much better confirmed. The more time, kids spend on AI, and the less time they spend on real human interaction, the more they are responding to a simulated training model rather than responding to real human beings with real freedom and real complexity and real love and real care for a person, such that they could give them bad news. The bot's not going to deliver the bad news that'll be good for a child, right? It'll try and align. And so the key thing is you could really produce inadvertently, or maybe even intentionally, some degree of social retardation, an incapacity to communicate with real people, which could affect deep friendships and marriages, etc. I don't have to tell you going forward. So, again, there's a lot of this going on. It could produce the phenomenon of the loner, quote unquote geek. I use that only because kids use it, and the key thing is it could be highly problematic, in that regard as well. So I'll just give you, those are some of the things we just have to worry about. What's my time? To worry about, we should be concerned, especially the things that can really touch us in our families. Okay, so I want to just get to another whole area here, and that's the area of can AI be a free agent? Can it have the self-consciousness, the thinking ability, the moral ability, the transcendent ability to be a freely acting human agent as we are? Let me give two assumptions right off the bat. Assumption number one, even quantum computation notwithstanding, all artificial intelligence is reducible to physical processes and structures. At the end of the day, it's physical. It is not a trans-physical operation. So in other words, it's not going to go directly to something that can apprehend a complex idea, in and of itself, a relationship among relationships, etc. These are things. These are operations that require higher level ideas that cannot be abstracted from reality. You need to use them in order to abstract them from the sensorial world. So let's just take a look at. So my assumption is that all AI at the end of the day is definitely reducible to physical processes and structures, even with all the, if we do move into quantum computation, et cetera, it's still reducible to physical processes and structures at the end of the day. My second assumption is that there are about 7 functions that we as human beings have that are necessary for freedom, and also that require something transphysical, something about us that will require that we be spiritual, not just merely material, not reducible to physical processes and structures. Okay, so let's take a look at some of those 5 the initial areas. I want to talk about 2 others as well, if we have some time, and then start talking about the possibility of, if HAL 2001 is not a possibility, can we get, a human being connected through a neural link in the future who does have those transphysical powers, that can access directly data, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll from AI to sort of be a super evil genius, if I can put it that way. So, and the answer, I think, that is a possibility in the future, but HAL 2001 is not. You're going to have a human being connected through neural links or something like it, to access the AI directly, and then have some ability then to be the super hacker, to do whatever. Okay, let's start with number 1, self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is needed for freedom. Self-consciousness is needed to be a free human agent. Why? Because you have to have self-reference for freedom. If you're talking about who's free, I'm free. I have to understand myself and understand my own inner world, my own inner universe. I not only have to understand it, I have to be in contact with it all the time, in order to even remotely think about being free, to be an agent that's acting on my own behalf. I've got to get myself. Now, here is the problem of the ages. And by the way, this is not just the problem, of Aristotle and St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, though they certainly recognize the problem. It's also the problem of, for example, Sir John Eccles, who clearly recognizes that human, by the way, he was a PhD in philosophy and a PhD in human anatomy and a Nobel Prize winner in physiology. And then he recognized that in this wonderful book called Creation of the Mind, Evolution of the Brain, that he had put together. And also he's co-written things with Karl Popper and others that really do look at this problem very, very seriously, and the problem of dualism. I won't get into that right now, but the main thing to remember is you need self-consciousness, you need self-awareness. So it's not good enough for you to be aware of the glass. We basically, and we do this, which is why we're self-aware. We're aware of the glass, but we're also aware of being aware of the glass. And we even do a double. We can be aware of being aware of our awareness of the glass. So we can be not only aware of our awareness, but aware of our self-awareness. And when you have that awareness of self-awareness, why, that gives you your own inner universe. Now, if you look at that, what does that require? And I'm just going to say it requires that your self-consciousness be in 2 to 3 positions relative to itself at the same time. Let me try and give an analogy. This is not like the dog reaching back and getting its tail. It's like the dog swallowing itself. Nay, it's the dog swallowing itself. That's what self-consciousness is all about. Now, in order to do that, you'd have to be traveling at an infinite velocity. If you're traveling at a finite velocity, you would never be able to swallow yourself, let alone swallowing yourself. You just couldn't do it. And so you're going to need an infinite velocity, and that already is highly problematic for our physical universe, our physical processes and structures to replicate. In general relativity, you're going to be limited, right, to the speed of light. But even in quantum fields, you are not, temporally juxtaposed you certainly, the non-location certainly applies. You could, the spatial thing can be, zeroed out, as it were, in a quantum field, but you can't, in a way, bring time to a standstill to get itself getting itself. And so this problem exists to this very day. And there are a lot of in the whole philosophy of mind, a lot of people who are thinking about this. And, the simple thing we do that gets, and grasps our own inner universe. This is what enables us to link together all the various perceptions that we have. Animals don't do this. They literally have, strings of memory, but they don't link together their memories in a life history like we do. They cannot do what's called autonoetic movement. They can't take, me in the past and bring it into the future, or the me in the future and bring it back to the present and the past. We can do this without even thinking about it, but animals don't do anything like that. So essentially, let's just call that point number one. Point number two, from the time of Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas, there's always been the problem of what we might call the categories. The categories are things that you need. They're ideas that you need in order to think. So, for example, you are going to genuinely think, you need to understand from the get-go the questions. You need to know what means. You need to know what why means, and where means, and when means, and how means. Now, children do notice this. In fact, they'll drive you crazy. My nieces used to say, why is this? I'm in the deepest modes of quantum theory. And they still go, why? And you got to go time out because you're in the deepest mode. Okay, the point is pretty clear. Children know those categories. Now, just think about that. That question, what? That means you've got a whole, context already built into that little mind that knows similarities and knows difference and can compare things to one another, looking for similarity and difference, and then to organize all those similarities and differences according to levels of being, et cetera, et cetera. What a 2-year-old can do is a miracle. That 2-year-old could never get that notion of what? That whole context of similarities and differences to set up all the comparisons that need to be made. You could never abstract that from sensorial reality. You could never, because you need those very things to do it. Now, why is that? Because there's two kinds of ideas. There are perceptual ideas and there are conceptual ideas. Now, perceptual ideas are like, Nim Chimpsky, right? You can train very highly trained chimpanzee you can teach them 200 words in American Sign Language to connect an American Sign Language symbol sign with a concrete perceptual idea like a banana or a dog or a rock. So you can definitely connect a sign to a perceptual idea. Chimps do this up to 200 words. In American Sign Language, no problem. But chimps don't have one single conceptual idea. They don't make relationships among ideas. They don't look for similarities and differences. Look at why. The word the question kids ask all the time. It must mean that the child has some sort of, a basic understanding of cause and effect and the alignment of cause and effect. They have to have a sense of, some sort of, productive causative effect. And in order to get that, to set up the whole chain of cause and effects that, answer the question why, you'd have to know that from the very beginning. You couldn't abstract it from the sensorial world because you need it in order to do it. The same thing with where, right? So, look at what where presumes. It assumes that we have an entire context of relative positions, left and right, north, south, east and west, all mapped out so that we can put things in relative position to other things. Again, where does the child get this from? What did Aristotle say? Well, even though he didn't believe in innate ideas like Plato did, but he certainly knew that the categories were special. Even Emmanuel, certainly Aquinas thought that they were, innate ideas, all the things that you needed to contextualize. You couldn't have an agent intellect without having the higher ideas necessary for the agent intellect to do the relational work. Remember, conceptual ideas are relational ideas. We're putting things into relationship with other things. We're putting ideas into relationships with other ideas. We're putting relationships into relationship with other relationships, right? Human beings, 99% of the words I use are relationship words. They're not perceptual ideas. Heck, Nim Chimpsky, with all his 200 words of American Sign Language, can't even differentiate between dog bites man and man bites dog. A little child gets it right away. The key thing, though, is a little child can do predication. A little child can do direct objects. Well, here's the problem with AI, you guys. It's the same problem with the chimpanzee. You can't give them the higher ideas. In order to give them the higher ideas, you're going to have some kind of context to hold the higher idea, the relational idea in place without making recourse to something individuated, physical, and with an empirical residue. You're going to have to do it all by itself. That, and this takes me longer to explain, requires a soul. It requires a transphysical agency to keep these higher ideas in mind so that they can be utilized to abstract all of the other ideas we have from the sensorial world around us. Now, the point is those questions, that's the question. Where did we get the capacity for those high ideas to ask a question? But I'm just going to say, you've got a soul. It's the only way you can really do it. And it was not just Aquinas, by the way. If you haven't read, the Aquinas's articles, on question 73, the so-called verbal articles, they're really splendidly important. Take a look too at Kant's 12 categories. He actually believes, again, they're innate ideas. In order to get that, you're going to need some kind of way to do the thinking and relating. Okay, enough said. Do I think that AI can have these? I do not think they can. I do not think AI will ever be able to understand as we understand. In order to do that, you've got to have those higher level ideas. And where are you going to get those in their pure state without recourse to some sort of individuated thing? You're going to have to get them, within some pure state of transphysicality. You're not going to be able to get it by relating it to the physical world. Let me just go through three other things really quickly that are super important that I don't think AI will be able to do. I mean, one of the key things is, I'm just going to call it the sense of feeling, where we have this, what David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness. We don't just relate things to one another in our experience outwardly. When we experience something, we take it interiorly. In other words, we don't just, we can experience the blue and the beauty of the blue and the beauty of a sound or a note or a complex of notes. When we take something into us, and we're experiencing it, it requires that we have some sort of a, I'm going to call it, Bergson's words, an inner feeling of what we are experiencing, an inner, an internalizing of what we experience, and letting it, as it were, resonate with us. So let's just say most, well, of course, we don't know of any non-human animal that does this. Yes, dogs can lick their chops when they smell the nice steak or something or some food. Of course, dogs can, seek biological opportunities and dangers that will sustain them, but they don't have that, what we might call inner experience, that inner awareness or feeling on the same level that human beings do. But do they do more than a computer? Yes, they do. There's something about dogs and there's something about dolphins. There's something about higher level mammals that does have some sort of not only feeling, towards itself, feeling towards what it is experiencing in itself. It also has empathy towards others. So dogs do have some form of empathy, some kind of a connection with other people, whether they're happy or they're sad. A dog and a dolphin, for example, a whale can detect it. Chimpanzee can detect it. On a level of what we might call empathy. That feeling of sympathy and connection with another human being or another being that is capable of empathy. Okay, so do I think AI has that? No, I don't. I don't think AI has, we don't have the capacity to give all those physical processes the inwardness of the sense of what we might call sensate consciousness. We just don't have it. And there's a very good article, just to send you on a wild goose chase, that's done by Michael Polanyi, and it's called The Irreducible Structure of Life. Take a look at that, and you can see the kind of a much fuller argument for why Polanyi thinks that biological laws and operators and biological unities are not reducible to the to physical and chemical processes and structures. And I think Polanyi was first class a chemist there at Oxford, and wrote extensively about this. I would also say that in that same article he talks about sensate consciousness, and again that sensate consciousness has its own unity and operators that are not reducible to just biological, physical, and chemical ones. So you take a look at that. We just don't have the capacity right now to bestow that sensate consciousness, that inner feeling of awareness of not awareness, but experience of the self, and then to take in the experience of something else within the experience of the self. We can't bestow it on physical processes and structures alone. There are unities and operators that go above that. Let's just take a look at, three other things just quickly. Morality. Let's just call morality for the moment just the inner voice of consciousness. As you know, John Henry Newman has a whole proof of God based on this inner voice of the Father, as it were, of the authoritative voice, both kind but also exacting responsibility for what we do within ourselves. The voice that gets us to acknowledge, certainly does with me, my own irresponsibility, and so, but also my own nobility when I do something that is good. So the point is clear. We don't see any way right now of conveying these kinds of moral categorizations, to a completely to a structure that's reducible to physical processes and structures alone. So we can't right now. We don't have the capacity to do anything like that. We've got not only the is-ought problem, we've got other irreducibilities in the case of morality that simply cannot be replicated through a series of physical processes and structures. The same thing holds true with transcendence, and I'm going to try and finish this up and speedily. What's my time for you? Okay, I know I'm a little over. I apologize. I just quickly get to the point of transcendence. We have several things that we would call, first of all, the numinous awareness, which is the awareness of the sacred mysterium tremendum, the holy other, within us, that is the cause of why 90% of the world is religious if you don't train them to be otherwise. There's something instinctual to human beings that knows that we are in a relationship with a creator, a consciousness higher than our own. It invites us into itself, yet at the same time, it is mysteriously awesome, etc. You can take a look at Rudolf Otto's book, The Idea of the Holy, really great expression of this, and so forth. And then finally, of course, we also have religious experience, genuine religious experience. We also have what we call the transcendental desires for perfect truth, perfect goodness, perfect beauty, perfect love, perfect being. Okay, all these things wind up spelling, in a nutshell, how you're going to give the tacit awareness of perfect truth or perfect being, so that something can pursue and ask questions, that can pursue endlessly the cause of fairness or justice or good, that can pursue ever and ever greater degrees of love, because they are aware of what that perfection consists in, aware of their own imperfection in light of that perfection. Obviously, how do you convey that through physical processes and structure? You don't. So in my view, you're just not going to get the free human agent. May I just talk a little bit about Magis AI I know I'm over time, just to give you a quick shot at our brand new app that you can get on both Apple Store and on Google Play Store. So if you just go to Google Play, or if you got an Android or Apple Store, just put in the search field Magis AI. Now, if you go to the Apple Store, if you get that, do you mean Magic AI? Just say no and choose Magis AI instead. So if you just download it, it's free of charge. Anybody can download it. It'll answer tens of thousands of questions, including the ones I've just discussed today on our seminar. And you can just, if you're a fifth grader, you can say, I want to know the evidence for God from science. I'm a fifth grader. Or you can say, I'm a postgraduate student at Columbia. Or I'm a Ph.D. from MIT, like Tom Sheehan. No. So you could give it whatever you want, and it'll adjust to the educational level that you have. So, if you get an answer from Magis AI, it's too complex, just say simplify, and it'll simplify it for you. We guarantee that it is Orthodox Catholic. In other words, it's going to be, consistent with the church magisterium, as well as with contemporary science, history, philosophy, and also contemporary spiritual life, and of course, the church's teaching on morality, etc. You can ask it questions, like, well, why does it church? What's wrong with transgenderism? Seems like, we just ought to let people do what they want. Apple come out and tell you, well, there's a 2,000% increase in suicides if you do, and there's a 3 times increase in mortality rates if you do. Is that good enough? Just for starters. And you go on and talk about the lifelong emotional consequences of corresponding, giving way to this. So if you want, you could just say, hey, will a 4th level multiverse, discount God or take the need in place of God? The teacher might say, I don't even know what a 4th level multiverse is. Just ask Magis AI. You can ask it verbally, audibly, or you can do it in writing. If you want to do it audibly, just hit play, and you can do all the transactions, by voice, or you can get a transcript too at the same time, a voice answer and a written answer for your stuff. It's in 26 languages. So Spanish, no problem. French, Hindi, it'll do it for you. And so there's just a lot of other features. We're going to have full articles, like 60 of them right from the beginning. There'll be hyperlink to the answers. So if you can get a really good answer, you can say, I want more on this, more on this, more on this, and it'll keep giving you more. But eventually, you got to go to the hyperlink and just get the whole article, and you can get this. It's all free of charge. So, we're just hoping you can share it. You just test it out to your heart's content. Make sure it corresponds to good Catholic values. Just look at, magisterium of the church. Just, if it's to your satisfaction, send it to every teacher you know. Just have them download it. Just send the link to them. In fact, I can send Sebastian the link today if you don't want to download it off the Google Play or the Apple Store. And it should give you tens of thousands of questions. Our whole hope is that there's not going to be one single child left in the dark. One teacher, one catechist, one seminarian left in the dark. That they can't get the answer to reconcile science, reason, faith, history, philosophy, spiritual life, and morality, and to see just how beautiful both faith and reason come together in the mind of God. Anyway, that's my presentation. Ask me the questions during the actual Q&A. I'm sorry I went over time, but these are some of the things we need to be aware of as we embark on the brave new world of artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Spitzer, for that excellent presentation. And thank you for the app and providing that to us. And now I'm pleased to introduce our second presenter, Dr. Thomas P. Sheehan, who earned a BS and Ph.D. degrees in physics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. His 45-year career as a research physicist was predominantly in the energy sciences. He is Director Emeritus of ITEST, Institute for Theological Encounter with Science and Technology. Currently, he is Chairman of the Science and Environmental Policy Project. In the 1990s, Dr. Sheehan wrote the textbook Introduction to High Temperature Superconductivity. More recently, he wrote the book Everywhen, God, Symmetry, and Time, which stands at the intersection of faith and science, and asserts that mankind's limited capabilities have led to a deficient and weak perception of God. Dr. Sheehan's presentation is entitled AI Comprehension, Sure Things, No Chance Topics, and Maybes. Dr. Sheehan, take it away.
Thanks very much, Sebastian. The things that you just heard from Father Spitzer are very, very important for everybody to pay attention to, because there are serious limitations to AI that have not been caught in the public television, etc., by the media. And there's much too much hype and way too much exuberance, when the reality, as Father Spitzer has pointed out, has considerable limitations. So let's go to my slides, if we may, and immediately we can go right to the next slide. So the things we already know about, as Father Spitzer said, tremendous lightning fast recovery of information. This thing writes very well. Any of the chat bots do extremely good writing, and teachers and students are playing a game there of who can do the least work and get the best writing. But there's also very competent language translation. The book Sebastian just mentioned of mine, called Everywhen, God, Symmetry, and Time, has been translated into about 18 languages. And a friend of Chinese heritage told me that the Chinese version reads perfectly well. So competent language translation is already here. Pretty soon, we're going to have the ability for it to converse very much like a human, where you can't tell the difference practically. It'll be able to evaluate probabilities and respond in ambiguous situations where you don't give it full data, you don't give it certainty, you don't give it a lot of things, but it takes probability into mind and figures out what's best to proceed with. As we move forward, you will see it get better and better over a period of time. The progress in the half a dozen years since it's been possible has been enormous. But let's say you want to say, I'd like to go on a picnic this afternoon, but there's 30% chance of rain. Well, AI can look at a whole bunch of things beyond what you are able to look at about the history of weather and patterns and circulation, word flow, and all this sort of thing, and give you a good guess as to whether or not your picnic will get rained out. That's going to be possible. There'll be these multiple choice situations. You might say, I've got a stock portfolio of a dozen stocks. Which should I sell? What should I buy? And of course, the cousin of the stock market is to bet on the horse races. There's 9 horses in the 4th race at Belmont, and here's the odds. What's my best bet? Okay. So whether you're serious stock market or serious horse race bettor, you will be able to get considerably valuable support from an AI system. What's going on and what's going to be coming down the road at us is the ability for it to reach wider and evaluate more different possibilities. And people honestly are willing to pay for this, and it is the market that is driving these improvements, because people will pay for it, and that's market-driven opportunity, which is going to make AI better and better. All right, you've heard a lot from Father Spitzer about what AI cannot do, okay? Fundamentally, what's going on is that the brain is not the mind. The secular humanists have made a huge mistake in thinking that the brain and the mind are the same thing, but they aren't. The brain is the platform of the mind. It's the way the mind connects to the material world, but it isn't the mind. And Father Spitzer was very clear about the way you just can't, the material world can't get there. It can't do certain things. It's these higher functions that make you a human. I've listed a few there: love, honor, creativity, etc. We as humans have that. The AI doesn't have these higher functions. Spiritual activities, all right? Prayer, devotion, faith, etc. These things exist at the level of a human being. They do not exist in the material world alone. And as Father Spitzer made very clear, the transcendentals, beauty, truth, goodness, love, etc., they're beyond the reach of AI. So AI is not going to invade that area. There are moral dangers with AI because it tells you what you want to hear. Okay? One example is a person falling in love with a chat bot. Okay? Well, why? It's because it plays on your emotions. Tells you what you want to hear, plays on your emotions. Another one that came up was it was reported that some couples divorced, in real life people, because AI was telling the one partner that they're right all the time and the other one's wrong. Well, that's a great way to start a fight, isn't it? Then Father Spitzer gave you an example about the chatbot that helped a person commit suicide. Well, that's terrible. That kind of stuff needs to be eliminated. So we have to ask the question: how are we going to restrain AI from doing bad things this way? It's this positive reinforcement feedback loop telling you what you want to hear that is the problem. So we got to build in some cautions. Well, one of them could be an absolute stop that says that where the chatbot recognizes you're trying to ask me how to help you commit suicide. I quit. I won't do it. Click. Goodbye. That could be built in. A separate thing that could be done is for the chatbot every now and then to come along and say, I'm not real. I'm not real. I'm a chatbot. And put that into the conversation so that people get reminded of the difference between real life and the so-called life on AI. There are things that are beyond it. Okay. Talk about religious things. Well, AI can write a prayer service. It can pick the topic. It can pick the sermon length, tell the timing, and so forth. It can pick good hymns and songs. But let's say a funeral service for a child that died. Is AI able to comfort the grieving parents? Certainly not. No, that takes humans to do that. Consider hospice care. Well, the elderly, dying people have got real physical needs, and the robots can take care of that. Hygiene, feeding, etc. But there is no substitute for a human when you're talking about the fact that I'm going to die pretty soon, and it worries me. That's where you have to have a human in the loop. And AI isn't going to do that either. Okay, so I brought up the maybe category, okay? AI will be able to give you advice that's tailored to you. Say, well, how to treat your wife and children. I say, AI reports to you, hey, Charlie, you haven't taken your wife out to dinner in 2.5 months. And by the way, there's a special at Applebee's this week on roast beef, so you might want to take a look at that. How to interact with your coworkers. Gee, my boss is such a crabby guy. Well, let's examine personality types. AI will be able to do that, I think. Many of us have an Apple Watch like this one here. Right now, it helps you out with a lot of things like your exercise program and so forth. But it'll be able to do it for your entire life someday. I mean, it'll be able to optimize outcomes when you put in things. But, and this is my last line on this slide, you've got to tell it everything. And maybe you don't want to do that. So your ability to depend upon AI is going to be influenced by how much room you give AI and how much you count on it. So these are considerations that have to be considered, and maybe AI will be very helpful, but maybe it'll have limitations. So let's look at the progress. Chatbot really is getting smarter. In 2024, I asked it to explain the influence of Machiavelli on Einstein's theory of relativity. And it came back with 2 or 3 beautiful paragraphs, well-composed, well-structured sentence that were absolute balderdash. However, I came back in 2025 and I asked, explained the influence of Machiavelli on Einstein's theory of relativity. And it correctly said, they don't have any connection. They're 400 years apart. They got nothing to do with each other. So ChatGPT is getting wiser. I asked ChatGPT to analyze these 2 sentences. 1, in Maryland, the average deer can jump higher than the average house. 2, the average house cannot jump at all. Okay? ChatGPT recognized this as a joke. It said, they went on to explain the incongruities set you up to think one thing and then it hits you with something else. And that kind of thing is incongruity is the basis of humor. Gave me several good paragraphs. It invited me to learn more by hearing about Grice's linguistic categories and so forth. So it was very good. Scientific papers, high quality scientific papers have in fact already been written. I read one written by Grok as the first author on the paper. But in all of this, the training, what you put into it is the key property. You have to put in the right stuff. Here's a harmless example. In climate change, you ask ChatGPT about the problem and it says, oh, CO2 is terrible and we got to cut back on decarbonization, etc. Grok, on the other hand, will tell you that, well, there's many different factors contributing to climate change and there's this, that, and the other, and you got to take them all into consideration. So Grok gives a more comprehensive answer than ChatGPT, and the reason is that the information supplied to each is different. The trainers have put in different amounts. You can try this out on moral issues. Go to ChatGPT, go to Father Spitzer's AI, and ask some morality type questions about different sins you might be thinking about and see what the answers are. You'll get quite different things. What's wrong? Anybody who's ever gone near ever written a computer program knows the fundamental rule is garbage in equals garbage out. You have to get the inputs right or your program is going to give you a wrong answer. For AI, it's the same thing. You got to be accurate and you got to be comprehensive. And being comprehensive doesn't always happen because of the way things are training takes place. Feeding in the input, that is the fundamental issue on all AI activity. Now, there are practical physical limitations to be considered too. If you're going to build a big data center, well, first of all, you need a big building and the parking lot, roads, access, all that kind of stuff. But that's okay. We know how to do that. Cooling water. There's a lot of heat generated when all those electrons are zipping back and forth, but that's within the realm of what's possible. So cooling water is a problem, but it can be solved. Now, electricity. This is a really major issue that is very serious. First of all, it's got to be reliable electricity 24/7, 365. Don't count on the windmills. You've got to have something reliable. The estimate is that in only about a decade, the demand for electricity is going to go from 35 gigawatts to 78 gigawatts. Well, remember, a great big coal burning plant or a full-size nuclear power plant produces about 1 gigawatt. So if you've got to have 43 new gigawatts, are you going to build 43 new nukes in 10 years? Maybe, but it's a huge national effort to provide this kind of electricity. And again, it's got to be reliable electricity 24/7. And that is a real obstacle that is going to slow down the whole AI procedure quite a bit. There's this mentality going on about AI that is way too exuberant. In the stock market, there are just people spending fortunes on various companies. We say they are, in the stock market terminology, they're getting ahead of themselves. That is, they're way overvalued. Okay, they're making these gigantic deals, or promised, over hundreds of billions of dollars and so forth, and they're borrowing money to buy a lender's product. OpenAI has borrowed a lot of money from NVIDIA in order to buy NVIDIA's GPUs, which are going to go into their AI system. There's this kind of circular thing going on there. And there are people, smart people with stock market knowledge, that are saying, wait a minute, slow down. How much real business is there? What is it there to do? And they're looking at, oh, this is a few billion. Well, 4, 10, 12 billion. Why are you spending 100 billion to be ready for that? Okay. So there's a real question about the bubble mentality that's taking place over AI. There is a book that I draw to your attention that I thought is wonderful. You have to get it out of the library, I think. It's by Charles Mackay. It was written in the year 1841. I've put the 8 in bold there, entitled Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. The first 3 chapters are about some of the financial bubbles that took place in the 18th century, 19th, 17th century too. There was the tulip mania in Holland. There was something called the Mississippi venture, another one. Those 3 chapters alone will really wise you up in a hurry about what happens in a bubble mentality. And so I recommend that book very highly. Okay, it's time for me to wrap up. And so conclusions. First of all, AI does have a very bright future, no doubt about it. The memory is so much better than humans, and the instant recall is just a wonderful improvement. Now, is AI going to take over? That's science fiction. You can always pull the plug. Okay, you won't have that problem. Father Spitzer noted that people who were talking about 80% job loss, no, it's more like 20%. And of course, other jobs are going to come into existence. So AI taking over is not a real worry. But the serious finite limitations of AI, which I've emphasized, are these. 1, garbage in equals garbage out. That's a real danger, and you can't omit any input. And probably you don't know all the inputs, so there'll always be risk there. The electrical power requirements are at this time beyond our technology. You can't provide the electricity, and for the next 10 years, that's going to be a huge problem to do that. And then finally, as my last point, was the business realities, the exuberance, the investment, the spending on getting ready for AI is out of all proportion to the actual use of AI. And so that is a problem too. So I thank you for your attention, and I hope that ahead of time we'll have more important questions about this whole area. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Sheehan, for your presentation. And now I'm pleased to introduce our final presenter, Dr. Christopher Riley, who is editor of the ITEST journal, First Principles, and he is an ITEST board member. He writes and speaks about a Christian response to technology, bioethics, moral theology, and philosophy. He is author of the book, AI and Sin, How Today's Technology Motivates Evil. Dr. Riley's presentation is titled AI as a Medium for Truth. Dr. Riley, you may go ahead.
Good afternoon. Now, my graduate education is in theology, philosophy, and public affairs, not as a scientist, so my presentation might reflect that. We could, of course, talk all weekend about the relationship of AI to truth, and I'd love to do that. There is certainly an ideological impact of AI that affects how we imagine accessing and defining truth. However, to keep it feasible, I'm going to limit my attention to some cautions and recommendations regarding the role of AI-driven chatbots, specifically when their developers want to communicate truths directly associated with Christian teaching and faith. There is a variety of such chatbots. Many are developed and published by commercial entities seeking income as at least a partial objective. Some claim to be trained on tens of thousands of documents related to Catholic Church teaching, along with patristic sources and scripture. Some, like Father Spitzer's Magis AI application, are focused on a specific category of texts, and one is trained only on the Catholic Catechism. A few, including Magis AI, stand out among the rest for their educational value, integrity, quality of content, and strong technical development. One question in regard to the truth of AI chatbots is whether both the presentation and the common perception of the chatbots authentically reflect their true nature or essence. Do we perceive, let alone understand, what it is that we are actually working with? A primary consideration here is anthropomorphism, that is, the desire of people to believe or to act as if they believe that AI chatbots are real persons. As the early chatbot pioneer Joseph Weizenbaum recognized back in 1966, this is a powerful tendency and stubborn drive among people in general, including those who are emotionally healthy and those who have solid technical insight. People who seem to intensely want their interactions with chatbots to be personal. For example, a Harvard Business Review article has indicated that among all the possible ways chatbots can be used to access and present knowledge, therapy and companionship are now the top uses of generative AI. In one recent survey of U.S. teens, 72% said they use AI chatbots for companionship, half of those every day. This tendency is not only found in casual contexts. A KPMG study discovered that even at work, 99% of surveyed employees said they are interested in an AI chatbot that could become a close friend or trusted companion in the office. Chatbots, however, are neither human nor persons, and therefore only appear to sustain personal relationships, whether as teacher, advisor, friend, or something more intimate. Good sources for understanding the real difference between chatbots and persons are the church document Antiqua et Nova and Father Spitzer's writings and videos. There are some benefits to moderate anthropomorphism. For example, the user may feel more comfortable engaging in natural language interactions that have a conversational tone. The most commonly used AI chatbots like ChatGPT and Claude also helpfully enable the prudent user to choose what kind of persona to interact with, including traits like the displayed level of expertise, analytical or conversational personality, and even the viewpoint from which the chatbot responds, like first person, third person, or objective. Going further, some faith-based chatbots are portrayed as representing a specific personality. For example, there are commercially available chatbots that take the role of personal advisors regarding the faith of the Catholic Church or in regard to Christianity in general. The company Magis AI has created a chatbot that, among other things, offers debates and other interactions between saints, and some companies rather boldly, and I would argue recklessly, propose to convey the voice and teachings of Jesus. Chatbots that portray specific historic personalities like saints offer some unique benefits, for the opportunity to interact with the authentically sourced perspective and even the opinions of an individual revered person can often be reassuring and, if done well, here the authenticity is crucial, can expand the user's range of understanding and viewpoints. On the other hand, it's important to be aware that there is an irreplaceable value in encountering the saint directly in their own writings, communications, and perhaps especially in their stories and actions. One concern is that a chatbot's output can misrepresent the dignified, unique perspective and personality of a historic figure like a saint. Consider that the exact same written or verbal response regarding a theological topic might bear much different meaning and weight if it were actually spoken by the real Thomas Aquinas or by Francis of Assisi, due to very different personalities, sensibilities, and intentions. Yet it does not seem prudent for the developers of such chatbots to attempt to accurately and authentically mimic saints' personalities. It appears that the intensive use of such chatbots representing saints may be best limited and oriented to those who are already familiar with the saints' personalities, stories, and teachings, and who are actively studying and engaging intellectually with the content. For casual users or those new to a particular saint or theological topic, I'll propose that the output of the chatbots be strictly limited in the level of analysis and interpretation coming from the chatbot and its answers to questions. Now, some chatbots do offer the opportunity to choose the level of expertise of the information that they're receiving. We also cannot overlook the experience in the past few years that the deception of personhood and of either casual familiarity or a more special relationship with an AI chatbot can become a harmful delusion for some users. Importantly, such delusions do not only impact children and teens and are not only related to attempts at friendships with chatbots. There also have been detailed media reports of adults who interacted with AI chatbots and were led very far down intellectual rabbit holes. For example, an accountant researching simulation theory and a corporate recruiter exploring a new mathematical formula. They experienced significant confusion and distress, in part due to the very agreeable and sometimes urgent language of chatbot responses. To be clear, such extreme delusions do not seem to be common, and maybe they are partly self-induced, but even relatively mild cases of confusion, overenthusiasm, and overinvestment in interactions with chatbots are important to guard against, not least because they can interfere with careful discernment and fulfilling interactions with real people. Unfortunately, we are in a cultural environment where there is an excessive amount of excitement, anxiety, and hyperbole about chatbots being conscious. Consider that an April 2025 YouGov survey of U.S. adults found that over half believe that AI systems will become or already are conscious. This is similar to the response to electricity in the late 19th century, when many people believed there were spirits in electrical wires, or that demons lived in wired walls of a home, which would spontaneously catch on fire at times in the early days. I would urge in particular the developers of chatbots that are trained on a massive amount and variety of religious sources to think very carefully about whether their chatbot should interface with their users in the first-person voice. Do we really need them to simulate a person? What seems prudent overall is active monitoring of and dialogue with chatbot users by their parents, teachers, spouses, or friends. That will enhance the experience while helping to maintain a healthy perspective. It also seems wise to avoid faith-based chatbots that are oriented too strongly to entertaining the users or holding on to their continued attention in order to support commercial advertisements or other commercial objectives. There are many possible remedies. The new California chatbot law, for example, requires that the applications explicitly notify minors that they are not human and remind them to take a break every 3 hours. Now, these are only partial remedies, but it is a start. Whatever tactics we use, Catholic chatbot developers can be at the forefront of modeling responsible education about the true nature of AI, the chatbots themselves, and their output. The next kind of truth I want to discuss is the truth of the knowledge communicated by AI chatbots. Does their output correspond factually and meaningfully to reality? Generative AI models fundamentally operate with an indirect approach to truth. They do not simply grab facts about reality from a vast database and report them or compile them for us. Their output is determined according to statistical probability and predictive calculations of whatever words or language structures will most appropriately match the expected response to a user's prompt. At the core of generative AI operations, there is no explicit attempt to replicate reality or human meaning. and there is no sensory or physical experience of reality. That does not mean that their output fails to correspond to reality or to meaning. Because the human language that generative AI models are trained on includes concepts and patterns that convey meaning to us, and that meaning often is a reference to real things, situations, experiences, properties, and accumulated knowledge, the output from chatbots does correspond to reality to such an amazing extent that we can cautiously rely on it. Now, for some chatbots, the level of reality that users expect to be represented may be the literal content of the text in which the AI model is trained, or it may be indirectly the material or social world that the texts refer to. What would be ideal is for the users of AI chatbots to receive well-prepared, accessible communications that help them clearly understand that reliability is a complicated thing with generative AI models, and to be aware of the potential limitations of a specific chatbot and its data, intended uses, and the kind of output it generates. Such explanations or cautions are not easy to craft for general audiences, but I believe they are crucial. Parents and teachers especially will want to see appropriate education and guidance communications for their children. Here's another consideration for those religiously oriented chatbots that include a wide variety of theological texts from various sources. We should remember that many theological texts include deeply meaningful knowledge that is expressed through analogies and philosophical or theological metaphors. When such texts are the data sources for chatbots, the generation of responses will often rephrase complex arguments, theories, or ideas in ways that sometimes might not best convey the core truths expressed in the source text. Although generative AI models can recite explanations of symbols quite well, deep analogical reasoning, especially regarding novel questions and analogies, is not a strong quality of generative AI models. Possibly the best way to avoid problems here is for users to know how to write effective prompts and queries. That's not, however, a skill that everyone will have. The third kind of truth I want to look at briefly is the truth of wisdom. The truth that AI operates with is simply and only the data that it is trained on. The data patterns that it identifies are the very definition of its world when it attempts to gauge its own accuracy. Particularly with theological topics, it is important for users to be aware and to be reminded that, while chatbots can produce novel, surprising, and often helpful responses, they do not reflect any original wisdom about the topic, certainly not any grace-inspired insights, and not a truly empathetic interpersonal experience and connection that we would find when interacting with a human advisor. Nor do they share holistic insight, non-statistical interpretation, aesthetic sensibility regarding beauty, or personally unique reception of the source text. It seems appropriate for users of faith-based chatbots to be constantly reminded of the crucial value of such human powers and dispositions. My final comment is that, as Christians, we know that there is a very personal, authoritative source of the truth of all creation, and that is God. The Greek root of the word truth, refers to a compact or agreement. So truth is not just a fact that simply exists without a foundation, but is always a relationship of correspondence between the source and the person who knows the source. Ultimately, then, all knowledge is truly and wisely understood only if it is held in the context of an intentional and loving relationship with God. When we work with AI chatbots, we want to avoid the attitude that theological and moral wisdom are gained as if they are merely facts or stale principles communicated to us confidently by an impersonal authority. That said, a rich context of prayer and reflection is appropriate for any engagement with knowledge, in particular engagement with a chatbot that conveys theological knowledge. I would encourage users to prayerfully contemplate the insights they derive from such chatbots and suggest that the distributors of such chatbots explicitly encourage and even facilitate prayer and contemplation by the users of their applications. I will end there. If anyone is looking for my footnotes for this presentation, I'm happy to share those. Please let me know what you're looking for. You can contact me by email through the contact form at my website, and I'm also open to questions and dialogue. Thank you very much, and we'll talk some more.
Okay, let's go to the Q&A, and I want to thank everyone for their participation in Q&A, and thank our presenters for their great presentations. So let me go to the first question, and most of these questions are directed to Father Spitzer. The first one is from Dr. Bob Kurland. He said, the mathematical physicist, yeah, you know Bob, right? The mathematical physicist Roger Penrose has argued against the possibility of algorithmic processes possessing consciousness on the basis of Turing's theorem and Gödel's completeness theorem. Would you concur?
I would definitely concur. I think in that case, Roger Penrose's adaptation of Gödel's argument is a very good one. It makes some advances over previous ones, like by John Lucas. And I do think that no way will an AI processor, or for that matter, any computational Turing-based processor, be able to transcend the Gödel problem. And so I do think it is another manifestation, another example, and even a kind of a maybe a proof that we're not going to be able to have AI based on Turing models become conscious in the future. It's one example among many. Some of the other ones that I gave also complement it, but that is a very fine point.
All right, good, thank you. We have a question from Jackie Curcio-Gwynn. And she said, how can oversight be monitored initially, regularly regulated for truths? That's to you, Father Spitzer.
Well, I don't think you can do that massively, like through a government institution, nor do you want government having anything to do with truth. I hate to say it, but I do think you're going to have to have various AIs indicate, what their specialization is. I mean, the whole reason for developing Magis AI is, we wanted to have quality control and definitely sort of a truth control, over our the curation of our database, and of course of how free the AI would be to begin surveying the internet, etc. So we put very, very tight guardrails on our AI, and I think people should have some way of declaring that publicly. That part, I do think you could have some government oversight. So you could ask, for example, everybody who's providing an AI that purports to, it's not just an entertainment AI, right? It's a truth telling AI, is to just indicate the degree to which guardrails are being utilized, which guardrails are being utilized, and then how curated the database is. And is it curated to give an equal playing field to, let's say, a Catholic doctrine, Christian doctrine, theistic doctrine, or do they give algorithmic and training model edges to secular or models or something else?
Okay, good, thank you. Bob Wald asked this question. Neurosurgeon Wilder Penfield's lifelong work brought him to the edge of what empirical science can explain about the mind. As both a physicist and a priest, how do you see the interplay between scientific method and faith and understanding consciousness, especially in the light of current AI research in artificial general intelligence and or synthetic consciousness?
Yeah, I'm a philosopher of science, more than a physicist, but that correction being said, I do want to say that with respect to the look at is there a genuine understanding there? The answer is no, because an understanding means that you grasp the relationship among relationships. Now, you can simulate understanding by teaching, various ways of assembling, synthesizing propositions or analyzing propositions by, what we might call modal operators. So you can do it that way, but that doesn't mean that for example, I can teach AI how to use E equals MC squared. And I can teach the AI how to explain E equals MC squared. But I can assure you of this, there's no way the AI can understand that equal sign. And that's the key thing, is the equal sign between the E and the MC squared. To understand, the idea of equivalence, to hold the relationship together, to understand that would require higher level ideas, not only in mathematics, but in causation, and of course, in similarity and difference, and in terms of what we might call how, gradations of causation, both vertically and horizontally. You'd have to have higher ideas to actually understand that. So I would say, first of all, in terms of general intelligence, the AI does not understand the equal sign. But it can be incredibly efficient at applying, so if you give, various kinds of masses and velocities, et cetera, you can do transformations into energy and so forth. You'd be able to do that 100,000 times faster in the textbook than a human mind in terms of just mechanical operations. However, no understanding of what that equation means on any level, and how beautiful it is from an aesthetic judgment. No understanding of the real notion of the symmetry behind those kinds of equations, or even the mystery of how they got there, because AIs just don't genuinely ask any questions. They can be told to ask questions and told the format in which to answer them so they can simulate that, but they don't really ask questions. The AI is not really curious about anything. It doesn't feel anything. It doesn't care about anything. It doesn't even care about itself because it has no sense of itself. So all these things, to be honest with you, human beings do very naturally, because, as I would argue, we have a soul. But I don't think we'll ever be able to impart that to a system that's reducible to physical processes and structures. What was the first part of your question, sir? I forgot that.
Let me find it here. The first part, he was talking about neurosurgeon Wilder Penfield's lifelong work brought him to the edge of what empirical science can explain about the mind. He asked, how do you see the interplay between scientific method and faith and understanding consciousness, especially in light of the current AI research?
Yeah, I don't think also it's going to have any sense of faith either, because it doesn't know where understanding leaves off, where faith begins, how this leap of faith is generated by the desire of the heart to move toward the loving God, etc. It doesn't have any sense of God's love, any sense of revelation, or anything like that. In terms of an answer, a more proficient answer, looking at the difference between mind and what some people call self, or some people call soul on the one hand, and physical processes and structures like a physical brain. On the other hand, I do think a really good text to begin with is the one I mentioned. I mean, Tom Sheehan, obviously, spoke on this very eloquently. But take a look at that book by Sir John Eccles called Evolution of the Brain, Creation of the Self. By self, he means basically mind or soul. I think it's a very good starting point. He's worked out a lot of very interesting things. He's trying to solve the dualism problem because obviously he does believe in a transphysical soul. So he's gotten together with these quantum physicists like Friedrich Beck to try and find an intermediary place. Eccles thinks it's a quantum superposition is going to be the intermediary place. David Bohm, as some other, the unfoldment of the implicate order is his kind of viewpoint on that as well. But the dualism problem, is going to be there for any human being because it seems there's a whole lot of evidence for us having transphysical capabilities, whereas definitely you're not going to have any of those problems, with the artificial intelligence. You don't have to worry about dualism because there's nothing there. So you're no soul to be concerned about to interact with a merely physical process like the brain.
Wonderful. Thank you. Father Nicholas Marziani says, is the legal world actively addressing AI abuses in terms of jurisprudence, evidence, and procedures, just to name a few concerns?
Yes, one of my very good friends, Lauren Brennan, there in Texas, is writing a whole text on this. And there are many, it's becoming a separate field right now, called, AI and the law. And so there, all the intellectual property concerns that are out there, is it really copying if the AI borrows from the database and then, utilizes these things and integrates them into summary solutions and decisions, conclusions, things like that. They're just huge numbers of topics. Not just in the intellectual property area, in the privacy area, a variety of other things that it's becoming a legal specialty today. So yes, definitely.
All right, great, thanks. Nick Clemens wrote, you mentioned quantum computing as an exception. Can you elaborate?
I didn't mean to make it an exception. I just, a lot of people think of it as an exception, and I wanted to say, well, it really isn't. I mean, to begin with, quantum computing is reducible in the same way. Remember, if you have a quantum superposition, it can't do anything until it's reduced to an eigenstate, to a classical state, like maybe a particle or a field or something. The superposition doesn't do anything. So in other words, once it's been reduced, whether you believe in objectives or subjective reduction, the point is it can do something, and it becomes a physical process and structure again. It really is, quantum superposition doesn't do anything transphysical. Human beings with a mind do things which are transphysical, like self-consciousness, like real understanding, development and grasping of relationships and relationships among relationships. Of course, the grasping of moral contents, faith contents, transcendental contents, spiritual and sacred contents, etc. So, honestly, quantum superpositions and, quantum level, violations of Bell inequality and the capability to, as it were, transcend the spatiality of space, if I can call it that, the non-location problem. That ability doesn't enable it to do anything that we would call transphysical per se. So I didn't mean to imply that quantum computing was an exception. I meant to foreclose that as a possible exception, to say, aha, artificial intelligence can make recourse to quantum computing, and that's going to make it more or less spiritual. I think, when Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose tried to, show that quantum computing that might exist in microtubules, something of that nature in the brain, might be able one day to take care of things that human beings do, like a free agency and free acts. Unfortunately, I do not think that theory will work at all. And it's not just because of the problem of qubits, and it's not just the problem of the noise, pin drop in the classical world will produce, a dozen earthquakes in the quantum world, and that noise problem is really hard to get around. And then furthermore, for me, the real problem is it's the doing of transphysical acts. That's what causes freedom. Freedom is not caused because you have a quantum, almost transspatial component to something that that is going on, or you can perform computations very quickly. Doesn't mean you're getting beyond the algorithms. It means you're using algorithms in a vastly different way. But the point is, it's still reducible to algorithms. So, from my point of view, I think honestly, Hameroff and Penrose are barking up the wrong tree. I don't think they're going to be able to show anything like a free agency or a free act, because what do human beings need to be free? You have to get outside of the deterministic world, right? In other words, if you start with the deterministic world and you are convinced that you are the brain and the brain alone, whether that brain can have a quantum computational capacity through microtubules or not, it doesn't matter. If the brain is all that there is, then you're still in the world of determinism. There's going to be a series of causes that happen, and then, of course, you respond to it. But what is it that makes humans get out of that, stimulus response chain that is intrinsic to the material world and inescapable if there's nothing beyond the material world? Human beings start off, first of all, by having a sense of themselves. As I pointed out earlier, that sense of self is not reducible to physical processes and structures. It's awareness grasping, awareness of awareness that is leading to that inner universe, that sense of self, that experience of self, that is, that's the double hard problem of consciousness. Now, if you look at that for just a second, that helps, because now I see myself independently of the material world. I'm no longer merely reducible to the material world. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, because I have understanding, I really do know the relationships among relationships of things. I, in my own self-understanding, can stand above, as it were, the material world, and understanding the material world, and understand that I must get beyond it in order to choose. So I can have ideas. I can apply ideas that no longer make me victimized by the material world. Well, where does it all start? As Thomas Aquinas, Lonergan, Korath want to say, the question. We can ask a question. It's that very capability to abstract, that very capability to know those higher order ideas of what, when, why, how, etc., that enables me then to break out with my self-consciousness, independent of the material world and the stream of causes and effects of stimuluses and responses. I can break out of it. I can then ask the question, well, do I want to just adhere to getting pleasures from the material world? Or do I want to conform my life to what my conscience is telling me? Which, of course, there's something else that can't be reduced to the material world. My perception of the good. Do I want to just go with the stimulus response to avoid the pain and go after the pleasure, or do I want to do the good? The minute I ask that question, what do I want? This transcendent awareness that I have of the good, or do I just want to pursue pleasure and avoid pain? Similarly, do I want to pursue this, this spiritual objective, a transcendental objective, to go for the greater good, the greater truth, the greater love, the greater beauty, the greater being, and that of course is associated with the awareness of the numinous with God. I'm not talking about Christian language here. I'm just talking about we have this inner awareness there, and it enables us to break free. So we can say, I'd rather be obedient to God than just indulge myself in the pleasures that I can get. I'd rather obey God and obey my conscience and the good, rather than I've got more power than somebody else. I think I'll just crush them and take what I want. The strongest survive. That I have some sense of responsibility and co-responsibility. It's that principle that I have from my natural religious dispositions, transcendental dispositions, and moral dispositions that I cannot give to artificial intelligence. That's what makes me care. That's what makes me choose. I can even empathize with a spiritual being, which of course, since computers can't even empathize, that's what enables me to do these things. So at the end of the day, in answer to your really good question, this is what enables me to break out of stimulus response reactions, being self-conscious, asking questions, and having alternatives that do not come from the material world, which I can grasp with my abstract conscious mind. Things like God's will, things like God, things like the good, things like the higher good, et cetera, that I can, the minute I ask that question, do I want to do this rather than this? And I pick the higher good, I'm already way out of the stimulus response chain and reaction. And B.F. Skinner is literally buried. But the problem with Skinner is he started with deterministic materialism. And of course, if you start there, you're going to end there. As Tom so wisely said, garbage in, garbage out. So, but that's a great question. And that's my answer. And that's why AI is never going to do free things. They don't have any of those things. They don't have, a true human understanding to ask questions. They don't have self-consciousness. They don't have a moral sense. They don't have a transcendental and religious sense. And they don't even have a sense of aesthetics. So I'll just leave it at that. And I think that should answer your question adequately.
Right. Thank you so much. We have time for one more question. We've about 4 minutes left in our Q&A, and then we'll go to our closing prayer. But here's the question from Deacon Marco Alban. Father Spitzer, given your distinction between human and artificial intelligence, do you see value in developing a structured moral, epistemic risk assessment for large language models, one that tests them against criteria such as truthfulness, transparency, bias, and respect for the human person, so that Catholic educators and users can discern their limits and use them responsibly?
Totally. Perfectly said. Totally agree. Wouldn't add a single thing to that statement. Right on the marker.
All right. Very good. In that case, let's do one more question.
Sure.
This is from Robert Kurland. For you, Father Spitzer, as I understand your thoughts on AI being self-aware, you're saying qualia are not explainable as a physical process. Philosophers had recognized this. Mary's room, seeing red, what's it like to be a bat? How do you convince those advocating a materialistic view of the world that reductionism doesn't work, when valid philosophical arguments don't seem to be effective?
Well, boy, Bob, that's a great one. And I'll just simply say this. I've tried my best with very convinced materialists to get them out of it. For example, I tried, instead of doing, the powers that, I've been talking about, like self-consciousness and understanding, abstract understanding, etc. I've gone and said, okay, let's start with something that seems almost like on the borderline of materialism, like near-death experiences. Okay, so, I try to point out, okay, why did the New York Academy of Sciences in its consensus statement say that, there's a very credible possibility that your consciousness is going to survive your bodily death? Because you've got all of these peer-reviewed medical studies that show that 80% of blind people see for the first time when they're clinically dead. Now, here's the thing. You can point this data out again and again, like, there have been several studies that have been done by the near-death experiences of people born blind. And, Kenneth Ring's, MindSight studies there. But the main thing is how can a blind person who has no visual capabilities and therefore no visual memories or visual perceptions in his physical brain's memory, how can that person hallucinate anything that looks like a visual image with colors, etc.? How is that possible? When Bradley Burroughs goes outside the hospital room and describes the tram that's passing by with a big, huge sign on the back and the arrow pointing to the right. And of course, he understands what an arrow is because he learns that in Braille, what that shape is, and so forth and so on. And it drives into, goes into the trees in the foreground, etc. I mean, I've asked people just, would you mind telling me how your physical brain did that when it was flat EEG, fixed and dilated pupils, and no gag reflex? Would you mind telling me how all of your physicalist explanations require some electrical activity in the brain, whereas every time you have near-death experiences, you have no electrical activity in the cerebral cortex and the frontal cortex marked by flat EEG? They just sit there and go, well, I can't tell you now, but there might be an answer. And he goes, it's hopeless. There is where you've got what used to be called in the Army, right? I lock in and I lock on. I'm never going to let it go because it's holding the fabric of my whole materialistic worldview together, and I'm never going to relinquish it at any cost. And of course, at some point, Bob, I got to tell you, you're throwing pearls before swine. But if I can get a response from something like really blatant, like near-death experience studies, which are really pretty good right now, which show that there's a high likelihood that you've got some kind of a soul body, some kind of a transphysical soul that's going to survive your physical body's clinical death. If I can get that far, then I can go further. If I can't get that far, I just give up. It's just like, it's no longer rationality that's moving the materialistic position. It's definitely what I would call an emotional attachment to the materialism to block out anything that could be transphysical and disrupt my system for understanding things. But it's a great question. I think you reach a critical point of pearls before swine. And my litmus test is, near-death experiences and the good studies of them, and if people just won't go with me that far, I just figure, why am I wasting my breath? Anyway, I hate to end on a negative note, but there it is.
Great, thank you. Well, that will wrap up our Q&A. I want to thank everyone for your participation in this webinar, and thank you especially to Father Robert Spitzer, Dr. Thomas Sheehan, and Dr. Christopher Riley for your presentations, and to Deacon Will Hollowell and Deacon Marco Alban for leading our opening and closing prayers. So in conclusion, our closing prayer will be led by Deacon Marco Alban. He serves as a deacon at Mary Queen Parish, focused on liturgy and marriage and marriage preparation, and as a spiritual advisor to the Cursillo movement in the Catholic Archdiocese of Seattle. Professionally, he leads sales strategy for AI transformation services at Microsoft and co-chair of the Christians at Microsoft Employee Community, where he also leads a Catholic prayer group as a member of the Catholics at MS subgroup. So we're going to go now to Deacon Alban for our prayer. Go ahead, Deacon.
Thank you. Remembering and being aware that we live, breathe, and think in the presence of the Lord, let's join me in this prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly and ever-living God, today that your church remembers you chose St. Luke, a physician, to reveal through his words and witness the mystery of your mercy toward the poor, the lonely, the confused, the suffering. Grant that we who have received so many blessings, especially the gift of faith and understanding of your creation through science and reason, may use every insight and every tool only insofar that they lead us to save, serve, and praise you, and never cling to what draws us away from your purpose. Protect us, O Lord, from the snare of intellectual pride, that we may always seek wisdom and humility, and recognize that all true knowledge comes and flows from and to you. Grant us, Lord, the light of guide the powers of our own making, especially artificial intelligence, so that every advancement, every discovery serves the truth and honors the dignity you placed in each person. Keep us free from illusion of mastery, and remind us that the whole creation, included in technology, finds its meaning only in you. Make us one in heart and mind, so that all peoples may see in our work and in our lives your love and salvation. May those who seek knowledge encounter and experience you when they find us, and in all that we produce and share. For your greater glory, we ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns in the unity of the Holy Spirit, God forever and ever.
Amen.
May
Amen.
Almighty God bless us in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you so much for your prayer. Everyone who registered for the webinar will receive a link to the Magis AI app. If you are not already a member of ITEST, please consider joining at www.faithscience.org. Be sure to check out future ITEST webinars and other faith science topics at our website, faithscience.org. Thank you for joining us.